Today on a special crossover event, it's the Rockies. It's fantasy baseball. Who do you need on your team? Who do you need to drop? And Colorado Rockies pitchers. You ever want to take one of them, especially this season?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a special Locked On Rockies, Locked On Fantasy Baseball crossover event here today on the Locked On Rockies and Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast. I am one of your hosts, host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, your Colorado Rockies fan extraordinaire. Been bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk here on the Locked On Podcast Network for 3 seasons now, and been following this team my entire life. Meeting for the first time is the Locked On Fantasy Baseball crew. We just met a few minutes ago. We're really excited to dive into this one. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about them so they can make sure they tell us that, make sure they know that we're talking to the experts here today on the show.
After you, Dom.
Okay, well, all right, guys. Dominic Martino, one half of the host for Locked On Fantasy Baseball. I'm a New York Yankees fan. Been playing fantasy baseball my whole life. And I got a little soft spot for them Colorado Rockies, too. Always enjoyed them, the Rockies.
Yes, sir. My name's Matt on A, the other half of this duo. And love playing fantasy baseball. Rockies, I have a soft side for a few of those guys. And you'll find out who later. So,
all right. Super excited. And I think I want to kind of start here. I think, you know, especially lately, I mean, there were the few seasons where there were some kind of, you know, you want Nolan Arenado. You're going to go get Trevor Story. You're interested in your DJ LeMahieu's. There were kind of some, and prime Charlie Blackmon as well, I would say, is some kind of the first names I think people who played a lot of fantasy baseball were going to with the Rockies. But lately, that's been a different story. So I kind of want to, when you guys were looking at your teams this year and so far this season, what are your thoughts about the Rockies and you can, you know, break it down on the field, but specifically from the fantasy side, what sticks out to you about the Rockies and Rockies players during this fantasy baseball season?
Well, personally, I was drafting pretty much Chris Bryant everywhere and hoping that, you know, essentially that you'd have home runs for days, right? That's essentially what the Coors Field is all about. That's what you expect from any power back coming off the Rockies themselves. So, you know, between like Chris Bryant, you know, plenty of other players on there. You're going to have a whole bunch of home runs and counting stats for days. Dom could do a better job of explaining this than I can at this point.
Yeah. So, you know, if anybody, you know, watched Matt and I do our mock draft stuff all over Chris Bryant, right? I was a big CJ Cron guy last year. I had him as like my breakout first baseman coming into last year. And boy, did he start off the season super, super hot. And then, you know, towards the second half started to fade a little bit. You know, he hit a lot better at Coors, as Matt mentioned. You know, it's a very power friendly park. So there hasn't been as many guys, as you mentioned at the top past years, you know, you have at least 4 or 5 bats that you're looking for with the Rockies. Unfortunately, you know, the names have, you know, left, gone other places. You know, the minor league system is all right. There's a couple names that I'm sure we'll get to at some point that have, you know, some something to like about them. But yeah, Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head when you just said, you know, it's unfortunately that the Rockies have kind of fallen off a little bit, hoping for better days sooner than later.
So high on Chris Bryant. Are you committing to Chris Bryant? Is Chris Bryant maybe someone on your trading block right now?
Oh yeah.
You can't sit there and necessarily say that he's been awful, but the singles aren't what we're expecting. Us as Rockies fans are frustrated because I mean, it's great, but he was supposed to be hitting the ball, you know, out of the yard, and still, I believe only 1, maybe 2 home runs at Coors Field alone this season. So it seems like a quick, oh yeah, early answers there. So Chris Bryant, one of those Rockies on the trading block, and I imagine CJ Cron's there as well.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Bryant specifically, I just feel like, you know what, he's still kind of adjusting to what the new team barely played last year, and now kind of getting his mojo going this year. I feel like it's just about the break. It's going to happen soon. And if you guys tune into us, you go back to our yesterday's show, well, 2 days now, we'll go to our trade for and trade away players. He was a trade for us. We feel that breakout, bounce back, whatever you want to go with, is imminent, and you should trade for him everywhere you got and hold on to him wherever you have him.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I've been a Chris Bryant fan since the day he was called up back in 2015 with the Cubs, and my brother Matt did a very good job explaining it. In the first couple of months, that little bit of March, then April, he was hitting like 297 over that time. And, like we said, the power's kind of been lacking, but even if the power isn't, like 30 plus where we expected it to be, I still think Bryant's going to be around 25, 28 bombs. The counting stats really depends on the team around him, how they perform when CJ Cron comes back. Chris Bryant has always been a runs guy, so the runs should be there. The batting average, he's a career 280 hitter. It doesn't just go away. When a guy has a track record like Chris Bryant, things don't just go away. And also, I think CJ Cron, when he gets back from the injury, I think he's another guy you should really look into buying because, even if you just play him at Coors Field, the track record from last year shows he can hit. He's got a lot more power than Chris Bryant. The guy, CJ Cron, is definitely somebody that, Rocky fans and fantasy baseball fans should still be excited about as well.
Yeah, and because CJ Cron can still hit the ball very far. I mean, he strikes out. That's really the biggest issue. But if he connects with a pitch, I mean, especially there at 50 or 20th and Blake and 5280 above sea level, it is certainly an impact there. But yeah, Chris Bryant currently 263 average, ahead of a couple of games by this. This might change here with a couple of games probably before this airs. But again. You don't hate it. It's just those power and numbers. But I'm curious, are there any other Rockies on your list? I think a guy that is still a sneaky option still, a Charlie Blackmon, perhaps of any interest to you both. He's still getting a lot of playing time and swinging a pretty decent bat. And again, the power, another example of someone whose power numbers way down this year, but someone the Rockies are continuing to play, someone that sees the lineup quite a bit and has definitely stepped up in some key moments for the Rockies this year.
Yeah, I mean, in deeper leagues, he's definitely worth a play on an everyday basis, but I'm not afraid to roll him out when he's hot, like right now. Like this last week, he had 6 runs, 2 bombs, 5 ribs, batting 389. Like that's great production, scooping him up off the waiver wires. He's somebody I'll probably add, drop throughout the season. When he's hot, and when he's not, he's out. So that's pretty much how I feel about Charlie Blackmon.
Yeah, I like Charlie Blackmon as well. He's still, a solid guy for when it comes to batting average. The runs and the RBIs are surprisingly pretty good on the year for him. He's probably doesn't have as much power as he did, back in like the, 2017, 2018 days when he was hitting like, 30 bombs. But you know what? I'm going to give you a name that might surprise some people. I love Randall Grichuk. I talked about him like a lot when, we were going into fantasy baseball season. I think he's a very underrated player. He's actually doing very, very well this year. I mean, like a Chris Bryant, the power's not really there yet. But hey, the guy has hit, around 19 home runs at least over the past since 2016. If we're not counting that short 2020 season, he's batting 367. The plate discipline's pretty good with 9 walks to 18 strikeouts. I think Randall Grichuk is somebody you should definitely look into if you're playing fantasy baseball, especially if you're in a deeper league.
He's someone that's hit it. He was injured to start the year, sports hernia to start the year. So he kind of needed when he first came back, a little bit of that. It was like kind of spring training, a little bit of getting warmed up, but he is exactly in that spot of someone who I think can make an impact, not only on fantasy rosters, but I think is going to be someone the Rockies might be considering a little bit of trade, and some teams I think are going to be interested in, especially the way he keeps hitting the ball, because he not only the power's not there, but he's hitting the ball really hard for some great doubles. I think he's got a crazy amount. He's got a great pace of doubles to start off since coming back here from the IL. I want to shift the focus to, I'd say, probably the trickiest part, and I'm curious if there's any really options that you guys are going for. I think maybe some bullpen arms, pitchers that might make your fantasy baseball team from the Rockies. We're going to dive into that coming up here in segment number 2, but I want to tell you about today's title sponsor of the show, and that's our friends at Gametime. If you're looking for last-second tickets, if you are looking to make sure that you don't miss out on the next big event, maybe, hey, you are a Nuggets fan and you want to get those last-second NBA Finals tickets, Gametime is going to take care of you and help you get those last-second tickets. Not only that, they got flash deals, and you can even see pictures of your seats so you know where you're going to buy. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Folks, this is the Locked On Podcast Network. This is Locked On Fantasy Baseball and Locked On Rockies, crossing over, doing a little bit of Rockies talk on fantasy baseball. Something because now, you know, because fantasy managers are going to be a little bit more active in trades than I think the actual GM and ownership of the Colorado Rockies will be. And I want to shift the focus to somewhere the Rockies desperately need to address as an organization. And I'm sure you all, as fantasy managers, need to address as well, pitching. The Rockies starting pitchers, as we know, most of them injured. I'm curious, do you take a flyer on a Kyle Freeland? Are you interested really in any Rockies starter at this moment? Or is it avoid at all costs, basically?
So for me, with any Rockies pitcher, I never want to pitch them at home, unfortunately. And I might get a little, hate for that, but I completely understand. But here's the thing. Like, I have no problem rolling out Kyle Freeland. My guy is a great matchup base, right? So a couple weeks ago, we were talking about on our pitch and ditch segment where I was not afraid to roll him out at San Francisco. Had a great game. It was pretty good. I was like, okay, no doubt. But if he's going to be at home playing him, I'm good. I won't touch him. I pretty much won't touch any Rockies pitcher pitching at home this year. It's just there's no matchup proof pitcher. You guys honestly haven't had one for a while that I would feel really confident rolling out at home every single week for all year, essentially.
Yeah, I think the last Rockies pitcher that I was happy to roll out was like Ubaldo Jimenez when he had that monster year back in the day. But besides that, since then, it's been really tough. As Matt mentioned, Kyle Freeland, you can play the matchups with definitely for sure. We've talked about him on our show quite a few times this year. Definitely somebody, in a pinch, you could definitely throw Kyle Freeland out there. Anybody else, I don't know who they got. They got Dinelson Lamet now. You really want to throw him out there, Austin Gomber. I mean, just names that, you kind of, even before they, had to pitch in Coors Field, guys that just weren't necessarily great. When it comes to the, the bullpen, you got Pierce Johnson closing, who's not doing so hot himself. I don't know, maybe if Daniel Bard gets back into that, closer position, he's somebody that, has done it before, has a little experience, has been solid at doing that. Maybe throw a flyer on him at some point. But besides that, once again, unless you could bring Ubaldo Jimenez back come be a beast again, there's not really too many guys in the Rockies pitching that I would be interested for fantasy baseball purposes.
Yeah, I was high on, and I've been Herman Marquez. I think is the Rockies pitcher who can be dominant, but unfortunately, Tommy John this year, and it's the issues there. But when he was an all-star 2 years ago, I would say that's probably the last time a Rockies starter has been. Hey, you can book, because there was a stretch where I think he was. It wasn't
the second half.
Yeah, he was very good, and he was good on the road. He was good at home. Someone that was going up against some really great talent, but unfortunately, again. The starting pitching depth has been an issue, but I think, for someone to keep an eye out there for some fantasy baseball fans, and another pitcher that can be kind of matchup dependent, but it's hard out of the bullpen. Justin Lawrence is a really interesting option out of the pen for the Rockies. He's got one of those sweepers. He's got a really unique arm angle and an arm delivery. Has some issues against righties, though. He's another pitcher that's been pretty matchup dependent. Brent Suter's been an interesting option for the Rockies. The Rockies were able to just claim him off the waivers. The Brewers just moved on from him, and he's served very, very well for the Rockies. And their bullpen's been much improved. But again, it's not a lot of flashy names, because I think if you're running a fantasy team, I think I got to imagine, and maybe you both could elaborate on it. The Rockies players probably find themselves on the waivers pretty frequently.
Yeah. I would 100% agree with that. There is not too many that are drafted, especially in the pitching category. And like I said, it's really just Crone and Chris Bryant at this point, and maybe down the line Tovar if he can ever take a step forward. But that's really just about it for me.
Let's dive into that. You gave us, you
Yeah.
dipped the toe in. Let's dive in with some of the young guys. I mean, we're seeing Tovar's offense get a little bit better. For those that aren't familiar, Ezequiel Tovar is one of the youngest players in baseball. The Rockies are turning to another young shortstop. This guy can play defense. The defense has shown up a big time, but I know that's not as helpful when it comes to something like fantasy baseball. But once he can stop swinging at every slider pitch to him, that will be a great development. But he's a young guy, but I think the ceiling's high there. I sent you a couple of names. Are maybe in keeper leagues or deeper leagues, are people keeping some of these Rockies prospects on their radar? Because again, Coors Field effects and high power numbers, especially at Albuquerque, for some of these prospects as well.
Yeah, Tovar, I mean, has a lot of upside just based off of what his steals potential could be. In 2021, he had 24 stolen bases. In 2022, he had 17. Like right there, that makes him valuable. Plus, he had good batting average when he was in the minors. So I think him swinging at everything under the sun is probably him trying to get more comfortable with it than it is anything else. With the big league jitters, I would say. But I mean, he also had about 15 and 14 runs between 2021 and 2022. I'm all about that too. In Coors, that number should go up at least to the 20s. So I'm not saying mid 20s, but maybe the 20 mark, low 2022. And that's phenomenal what a guy doing 20 stolen bases to go with it with batting average. So Tovar is somebody like in dynasty leagues I was actually targeting in my rookie drafts because, hey, you need stolen bases. He could be one of those future guys that take you to the next level in that category.
Yeah, I love Tovar as well. You said he's 21 years old. Guy is super, super young. And something Matt and I like to talk about, when you're that young, you're still, developing as a man. And, he's 6 foot 162. If he could put on a little bit of muscle there, as Matt said, I could see him, crossing the 20 home run plateau. Something that we talk about on our show all the time is, you see a lot of rookies struggle. We were spoiled a few years ago. We had Acuna, we had Soto, Tatis, guys that just clicked instantly. And if you're newer to fantasy baseball and baseball in general, that's not the norm. It only takes the guys a couple of years to grow into their man body, get used to big league pitching. And I think Tovar is somebody that, can do it. He had great numbers in the minor league. But I actually want to talk about somebody that might be a little bit lesser known, and that's Jordan Beck. I don't know if anybody's really familiar with him yet, but somebody that's down in the minors right now, another young buck, 22 years old. He's got 13 home runs in 42 games, 35 runs, 41 RBIs, batting, 273. I think he's got a lot of upside. Maybe the Rockies give him the call this year, see what he can do. And, I talked about, Tovar, but Beck's already got a man body, 6'3", 225. I think he can come up and, cause some damage. If the Rockies want to see what's going on with him, give him the chance. Who knows? That's somebody that, everyone should be keeping their eye on. Once again, Jordan Beck.
I like that. I like that a lot because the Rockies are really finding themselves in a position where they should, if they got guys that they think that they can come up and give it a shot for, go for it. And that's what's frustrating because it's as much as you want to root for some of these guys. And as some people might be surprised here in May, Rockies were second best team in the NL, or I think they're going to fall below the D-backs after this series here and be the third best team in the NL behind the D-backs and the Dodgers. That's a much better stretch, but the hole that they need to climb out of to get back to relevancy this season is a tough one. And so I'm curious if the Rockies do make some moves, if they move Grichuk, if they move some of these players, are you a little bit maybe more inclined to pick them up for different environments, or does leaving Coors hurt their value a little bit for you as we get close to the trade deadline?
Well, I would have to go and look at their home and away splits from where they're doing in their, home runs, for instance. You could always see like a drop off, at least for a little bit, for home runs to, return to mean. So if they're a home run guy in Coors, there's a good chance that they may not be when they leave. It didn't really instantly translate with Nolan Arenado outside of his first year. You were like, what happened to the power? But then his second year, he kind of exploded. And again, this year, he's just been a monster. But and even LeMahieu, when he came to the Yankees, he kind of just nothing ever happened. He kind of was just hitting bombs. But, you see other players that aren't coming to my mind right now that just don't instantly translate. And it takes a little bit for just the power numbers to go away, because my rule is with players going to new teams, it takes a little bit to get going because you got to bring your whole family there. You got a whole life adjustment. They're still human beings. But fantasy wise, I kind of tend to stay away from anybody leaving a new team unless they're like, I don't know, Bryce Harper going to a new team. That would be like one of my few exceptions, was to be a big player.
Yeah, I'll hop in and say there's not too many guys that I would truly get excited about, because what are the Rockies really going to trade? A Ryan McMahon, even a Profar who they were high on. I don't really see too many guys on that roster that would benefit in fantasy baseball from leaving, the Coors Field environment, unless they go to a great team, unless someone goes to Houston or the Dodgers where they could sit in a good lineup and, rack up some counting stats. But, as Matt said, Coors is one of the best parks to hit home runs in. So leaving there would take away, a decent amount of value from any Rockies player, except unless maybe it was a pitcher. Unless Kyle Freeland, goes to somewhere that's a better, pitching park and, gets a chance with a good pitching staff and a good pitching coach setting where, they could say, hey, maybe just correct this, adjust this, especially since you're at a Coors Field now and you're pitching in a better environment. That's somebody specifically, Kyle Freeland, maybe that if he goes to a new, better team, I could see benefiting, but not too many hitters over there.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate one because I think people are surprised when they hear Rockies. You think all this offense, but then when you look overall, the Rockies haven't necessarily blown people away on offense, but the home runs are coming back for some of these players. We'll see. You mentioned Ryan McMahon there before we move on. I do want to just touch base on him. He very hot last couple of weeks. Probably been great with the Rockies, doubling his home runs, leaving the yard. He's a Gold Glove caliber third baseman. Is Ryan McMahon going to enter? I know you mentioned not too excited, but maybe someone to keep on the radar. Maybe someone you could scoop up in a trade. Maybe a decent add-on for a trade.
I mean, right now, McMahon is actually going off. Like this last week, he had 7 runs, 4 bombs, 12 ribs, and batting .500. Like right now, he's somebody I'm willing to stream. And to be honest, he's about 70% owned in all of Yahoo leagues. So you probably would have to trade. So like if I was trying to make a deal, for instance, and I was trying to get a job done, I'd be okay with trading him away because he's hot right now. So he'd actually be a sell high, but like more of like a key little finish, little way to add the end of the trade to kind of get the deal done. I wouldn't be trading for him, but I wouldn't be opposed to trading him away to get that deal done. Like I said.
Yeah, Ryan McMahon's always been such a tease, man.
Mm-hmm.
He had so
we
much
can relate
upside.
to that. I can relate to that.
So much upside, man. I always loved him, especially after that, like his first like real season in 2019. He had the 24 bombs, 83 RBIs, hit 250. You thought, hey, this kid's 24. He's got all the upside in the world. And then 2020, I give everybody a break for 2020. Tough year for all of us, just as as human beings, no less professional athletes who got a tough stick. But right. Then 2021, he's so up and down, such a like ride the wave type of player. And a term I always like to use is, hey, juice the orange. While he's hot, if you picked him up, he's on your fantasy team, sure, ride the wave. But he's, once again, not somebody I'm really going to go out of my way and trade for, because I feel like I know who Ryan McMahon is at this point. There's going to be, 2-3 weeks where he's absolutely great, awesome, tearing it up. And then like the next whole month, he's going to be, pretty mediocre.
Yeah, we're unfortunately fighting the same type of feelings, and I'm hoping that we did a pod earlier. Maybe this is the breakout, because if it is the breakout, buckle up. Ryan McMahon has that high ceiling, but we have yet to see
tremendous upside.
Yeah, he really does. So certainly a name to watch, but we're going to take things, maybe make it a little bit more generic and kind of help some fans here attack their fantasy teams as they get to this point in the season, as maybe some key points coming up, and also want to just see what some all-time favorite Rockies pickups in fantasy baseball of all time, some all-time Rockies players here coming up here in segment number 3. This is a special crossover event between Locked On Fantasy Baseball and the Locked On Rockies podcast. We got a great show here. We've had a great show talking all sorts of Rockies baseball here. We got Dom, we got Matt, we got Paul here. I'm from Locked On Rockies. If you aren't familiar with me, Dom and Matt here from Locked On Fantasy Baseball. And I think we've had a good conversation. It kind of sums up where the Rockies are at as a team anyway, where it's like, yeah, like there's some good stuff there, but nothing flashy. So I kind of want to jump in the time machine here, and I'm curious, what have been your favorite Rockies fantasy plays of all time? Maybe it's a stretch where you knew someone was hot. Maybe you were in on Nolan a little bit early and were able to keep him in your dynasty league. What's your favorite Rockies moments involving your fantasy teams?
So, Dom, I'm taking this. I'm sorry.
I know where you're going already, so go ahead, my brother. I know where you're going.
So we were doing like a startup dynasty league, like 10 years ago together. And and this is like right as, we were like, okay, Nolan Arenado might be the guy. And, nobody really knew about him in the room except for like Dom and one other person. And I was like, I should draft him right now. And it was probably around like the 6th round. And I'm like, oh, that was a steal, because that year he just blew up and did his, his typical Arenado self, 100 runs, 100 ribs, 35 bombs, batting 300, like the glory days of Nolan Arenado. And, he's probably my favorite Rocky, for the last decade. I got to say, him and Blackman just have always been my two favorite guys. And then guilty pleasures later would be John Gray after he left the Rockies.
Well, yeah, no, Matt, we love Nolan Arenado, but I'm gonna chime in. I got some like older ones for you here. I got a couple. First, you got to start with, I think, one of the best Rockies of all time, Todd Helton. You can't talk Rockies and not talk about Todd Helton. Just Todd Helton. I remember a couple of times when I first started playing fantasy. Some of those high 30s, low 40 home run season. I think he almost got to 50 one year. Had him on a bunch of my teams and always loved him. Another one, once again, just kind of guys that you got to talk about when you talk Rockies, Troy Tulowitzki. Before he became like super injury prone, he had some monster years. I know he had that like 30 home run, 20 steal season, hit 300 a bunch of times. Always been a fan of his. And then my last, one I got to mention is Cargo. Cargo is Carlos Gonzalez, always been, a great fantasy player. Once again, guy had like a 30-20 season. I think it was even like a 35-25 season, hit like 330. Always been a fan of him as well. So there have been Rockies in the history that have been great for the Rockies and fantasy baseball. But, as we mentioned at the top, Paul, it's kind of been a fall from grace a little bit with, a lot of those guys. I'm really hoping the Rockies can turn it around. Just been a team that I've always been quite a fan of, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can be such a fun team, and what's been frustrating about this point is they had a fun team. They could have stuck with that fun team, and they didn't do so. But for now, we just got to hope for the best. Matt had to run there a little early, but that's all right. Dom, let's wrap things up here on today's special crossover. What are just want to know where people can go and make sure they stay up to date with all things you guys, and your tip for fantasy baseball players right now. What do fantasy owners and fantasy managers need to be thinking about at this point in the season?
Well, I'll start off with the tips. Let's start there. And my big thing is that I always stress to fantasy owners, especially if you're new, know your league settings. These days in fantasy baseball, there's so many different kind of leagues, and you can't necessarily follow the same draft strategy or pickup strategy that you can for one league for the next. You got points leagues, you got regular roto, you got head-to-head categories. I would say know your league. Just make sure you know the settings. Look at the way that the players finished last year. I know, especially we play mainly on Yahoo, but I know ESPN, CBS, a lot of other platforms. You can go back to last year, and if it's points league, see who scored the most points. See if it's pitchers or hitters. I know some leagues lean both ways. You could see if if you're in a head-to-head categories league, okay, who finished at the top, and just kind of gauge, where your league is and stuff like that. Otherwise, check us out on Locked On Fantasy Baseball. We give some of the best advice in the industry. We're on YouTube. We're almost close to 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed already, come check us out. We're also available on all social media platforms, podcasting apps. Search for Locked On Fantasy Baseball and you'll find us. And Paul, what was your other question again? Skipped my head there. I know you had one more there.
You gave the tips. That's all, and where to find you. So Matt's back, and Matt's here, so I got to get Matt's tip as well before we go. Matt, I was asking Dom there, what do fantasy managers need to be thinking about right now? What are the things that are on your mind? What do you got to do right now at this point in the fantasy baseball season?
Oh, okay. So honestly, how to manufacture a win each and every week. So like now we're in season, the draft is done. How do we win each and every week? Is it my pitching that's my weak point? Is it my hitting? what do I need to do? How do I need to add players off the waivers? How do I do that? Is it just, do I need to get the counting stats up and identify your weaknesses of your team and then kind of either fill it into waivers or through trades? And we'll be able to help you out through that if you just come on over to Locked On Fantasy Baseball, and I'll be able to give you all the best tips and tricks for the rest of the year.
Matt, Dom, thank you so much for you Locked On Fantasy Baseball listeners, everydayers out there. I'm Paul Holden, host of the Locked On Rockies podcast. If you're curious about how your Rockies are doing out there on your bench or on your fantasy team, I'll keep you covered all season long. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're also available on the SiriusXM app and on SiriusXM. All you got to do is just search Locked On Fantasy Baseball or Locked On Rockies. You'll be taken to where you need to go. Folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Podcast Network.